fields on the Sabbath morn. Grain in trembling hands is torn, whispers rise like circling doves. Law and mercy stand opposed, yet through the hush his footsteps fall. Lord of Sabbath, Lord of all, not to bind but to restore. Jubilee at every door. From Nazareth the trumpet cry, the captives free, the broken rise. Now living wine begins to flow through hearts prepared to know. Pour the new wine, let it run through willing skins, through everyone. Grace like rivers bold and wide, mercy stronger than our pride. Shift our hearts from self to you. Make us faithful, make us new. Lord of Sabbath, great in love, write your freedom from above. Blessed are the poor who reap, seeds of promise buried deep. Woe to crowns of hollow gold, when mercy's fire makes all things fold. Stretch the withered, raise the hand, life awakens at command. On this day the chains release, sovereign King of rest and peace. Delight our souls in holy flame, meditate upon your name, till thought and breath and will are one, and yielding fruit is done. Lyre and aloes cry loud, frame drum beats like thundercloud, bronze and strings and swelling.
So today we're looking at something that is, well, it's chemically active, it's under immense pressure, and honestly, it can be pretty dangerous.
We are talking about fermentation.
We are, but not in a vineyard in Napa. We're talking about a metaphor that really acts as the structural spine for the entire narrative of Luke chapter 6.
It's such a volatile image, this whole concept of new wine.
Exactly. And to get our heads around this, we're digging into a really diverse stack of sources. We've got some heavy theological research papers, a slide deck that's titled The Physics of the Kingdom.
I love that one.
And a transcript from a community discussion group that spent their morning really grappling with this text. And the core tension that just jumps off the page is this explosive interaction between new wine, which is Jesus' ministry, and old wineskins.
And just to, refresh the physics for everyone. In the ancient world, you did not put fresh fermenting grape juice into old, stiff leather skins.
All right.
As the wine ferments, it releases gas, it expands, and if the skin was old and brittle, it couldn't stretch, it would just burst.
So the equation is pretty simple. New power plus old structure equals an explosion. And our mission today is to uncover how Luke is inviting his original reader, Theophilus, and, us, to avoid that, to swap out the rigid, legalistic old wineskins for a life that can actually hold this fermenting grace.
And before we even get to the conflict, and there is a lot of conflict in this chapter, I want to pause on how that community group prepared for this. They talked about 3 words as like prerequisites for handling this kind of pressure: delight, meditate, and yield.
I had to stop reading right there because their definition of meditate was not what I expected at all. I hear meditation, I think of a quiet room, silence, emptying your mind.
Zen, right? The Western lens. But the sources point out that the Hebrew concept they were talking about is almost the opposite of that. It's actually closer to a growl. The word implies muttering. It's the sound a lion makes over its prey.
That is such a visceral image. So meditating on a text isn't sitting in silence, it's chewing on it.
Exactly. It's active rumination. You're muttering the text to yourself over and over until it literally rewires your neural pathways. It isn't about emptying the mind. It's about filling it so completely that it changes how you process reality.
Which is the perfect setup for Luke 6. Because Jesus is about to ask people to process reality in a way that seems completely backward. If you're not muttering on this stuff, really grappling with it, it's just going to bounce right off.
So let's jump in.
Let's do it. Segment 1, The Sabbath explosion.
This is where we see the old wineskins actually burst. We're in Luke 6, verses 1 to 11. The disciples are walking through a grain field on the Sabbath. They're plucking heads of grain, rubbing them in their hands, and eating. And the Pharisees see this, and they are absolutely outraged.
Okay, let's pause here, because for a modern reader, this just looks like the disciples are grabbing a snack on a hike. Why is this a national crisis? The sources talk about a fence around the law.
Yes, and this is critical context. In the Torah, Deuteronomy 23.25 specifically allowed you to pluck grain with your hand from a neighbor's field. It was kind of the original buffet rule. You can eat what you need, but you can't bring a sickle and harvest for profit.
So biblically, they weren't stealing.
Not at all.
So the issue wasn't the grain, it was the timing.
It was the timing. It was the Sabbath. The Pharisees had built what they called fences around the Torah to make sure nobody ever accidentally broke a command. So they created these really detailed definitions of what work was. And plucking grain, that was defined as harvesting. Rubbing it in your hands, that was threshing.
So they took a handful of kernels and turned it into agricultural labor.
Precisely.
But I want to play devil's advocate for a second here, because it's so easy to look at the Pharisees and say, oh, look at these uptight religious bureaucrats. But the slide deck in our sources points to Jeremiah 17. The Pharisees aren't just being petty, are they?
No, and that is such a crucial insight. They were trying to be annoying. They were trying to prevent an apocalypse. They're looking at their own history. Why did Jerusalem burn? Why were they exiled to Babylon? The prophet said it was because they broke the Sabbath.
So in their minds, the Sabbath is the containment wall that keeps God's judgment out. They're the safety inspectors on a nuclear reactor.
That is a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
They believe that if they let these little infractions slide, the core melts down and the nation is destroyed again. So when they see the disciples plucking grain, they don't see a snack.
They see a breach in the containment field.
They're terrified.
Which just raises the stakes immensely. So Jesus isn't just arguing with a grumpy neighbor, he's poking the safety inspectors right in the eye. And his response is fascinating. He starts with this legal precedent about David eating holy bread, arguing that mercy trumps ritual. But then he drops the nuclear option.
He does. He makes a claim that is frankly terrifying if you're a Pharisee. He just says, the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath.
The research papers spent a lot of time on this title, Son of Man. I think we often hear that and think, he's just emphasizing his humanity. He's a regular guy.
That's the modern reading, but it's completely incorrect in this context. He is referencing Daniel chapter 7. In that vision, there's a figure, one like a son of man, who rides the clouds up to the Ancient of Days. And what is he given?
He's given dominion, glory, a kingdom that will never end.
Exactly. He's given cosmic authority that supersedes everything. All earthly empires, all religious structures. So when Jesus stands in a grain field and calls himself the Son of Man, he is saying, I am that figure from Daniel's vision. I have the authority of the throne of God.
And then he pairs it with Kyrios, Lord of the Sabbath.
Which is dangerous on two fronts. Theologically, Kyrios is the Greek word used for Yahweh. So he is claiming to be the very source of the Sabbath. He isn't saying, I have a different interpretation of the rule.
He's saying, I am the architect of the house.
Exactly. And politically. In the Roman world, Caesar is Kyrios. Caesar is Lord. So Jesus is standing there, claiming divine authority over Jewish law and implicitly challenging the Roman order. He's centering the entire universe on himself.
That is just breathtaking. No wonder the text says the Pharisees were filled with fury.
Right. It wasn't just anger, it was cognitive dissonance. Their old wineskin, their entire framework of how God works, it couldn't stretch to contain a man who claims to be God and prioritizes mercy over their fences. The pressure was just too high, the skin burst.
So the old wineskins are ruined, they're leaking everywhere, and if Jesus wants to hold this new wine, this ministry of mercy and authority, he needs new vessels.
Which brings us to the next movement in the text.
The selection of the 12 apostles.
And notice the preparation. Before he picks them, Luke 612 says Jesus went out to the mountain and prayed all night long.
The source material had this beautiful line about it. Solitude with God brews the boldest choices.
I loved that. Don't select your team without the fermentation of prayer. And then look at the team he picks. If the Pharisees are the old wineskins, rigid, scholarly, elite, who are the new wineskins?
They are. Sketchy. I mean, you have fishermen who are uneducated laborers. You've got Matthew, a tax collector, which means he was basically a collaborator with the Roman occupation.
And a traitor.
It's an unlikely vintage, to say the least.
But it's intentional. He isn't looking for structural integrity. He's looking for pliability. He chooses ordinary, flawed people because they are the ones who know they need mercy. They're the ones willing to be stretched.
And it's not just the 12. The text mentions a great multitude from Tyre and Sidon. That's Gentile territory.
It is. The borders are breaking down. The new wine is spilling over from Judea into the Gentile nations. It's becoming expansive, universal. This isn't a tribal religion anymore.
So we have the explosion of the Sabbath, the brewing of this new team, and now we actually get to the taste of this wine, the teaching itself. We move to the Sermon on the Plain.
And notice the setting. Matthew has the Sermon on the Mount. Luke puts it on a level place. It's grounded. It's accessible. He walks down to them.
And he starts with the Beatitudes, but they feel sharper here than in Matthew. Blessed are you who are poor. Blessed are you who are hungry. But then he adds the woes. Woe to you who are rich, for you have received your consolation.
This is the upside-down kingdom. In the Roman world, and let's be honest, in our world, wealth and fullness are signs of divine blessing. If you're rich, the gods must love you. Jesus just completely inverts it. He says God's favor rests on the lowly.
The community discussion transcript really grappled with this. One person asked a question that I think we all need to sit with. They asked, am I spiritually needy or self-sufficient? Do I cling to comforts that block my obedience?
That's a haunting question. It forces you to check your own wineskin. Are you too full of yourself, your own resources, your comfort, to hold the new wine? Because if you're already full, there's no room for what Jesus is pouring out.
But the part of the sermon that seemed to generate the most conversation, and frankly the most resistance, was the section on enemy love.
Luke 6.27. Love your enemies, do good to those who hate you. This is the most potent distillation of the new wine.
And this is where the rubber meets the road. Because love your enemies sounds great on a greeting card. But in that community transcript, one person was brutally honest. He just said, I have old wineskins. I categorize people. I don't want to love the person who's trying to hurt me.
And he's right to feel that. That's human.
Right. I mean, it feels rational. Evolution says if you hit me, I need to hit you back to survive. If I love you while you're attacking me, I'm just a doormat. I'm selecting myself for extinction.
It is rational. That is the old wine. It's the wine of self-preservation. It tastes good because it feels safe. Retributive justice tit for tat is the operating system of the world, and it's effective, in the short term.
So Jesus isn't just asking us to be nicer, he's asking us to install a completely different operating system.
He's asking for God-like generosity. The text says, be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. The source material calls this a strategic fermentation. You aren't loving the enemy because they deserve it or because it's safe. You're loving them to break the cycle of violence.
It's aggressive mercy.
Exactly. The text says if you only love those who love you, what credit is that? Even sinners, the old wineskins, do that. The new wine creates a distinction. It marks you as a son of the Most High because you are acting like God, who is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked.
That phrase, kind to the ungrateful, always stings a little. It really highlights how different this new wine is. It's active, it's bubbling, and it puts immense pressure on our natural instincts.
And that pressure leads us to the final metaphor Jesus uses in this chapter. He moves from wine to architecture, the house on the rock.
Right. He tells the parable of the tree and its fruit, showing that outer action comes from inner character, and then the two builders, one on rock, one on sand.
And here's the pivot point. We have to look really closely at how Jesus defines the rock. Because I think in church circles, we hear rock and we think belief. We think, oh, I believe Jesus is the Son of God, so I'm building on the rock.
But that's not what the text says, is it?
Not at all. Jesus defines the rock very clearly. Everyone who comes to me and hears my words and does them.
The doing is the rock.
The doing is the rock. And that changes how we see the sand builder. I always pictured the guy on the sand as, the atheist or the person who rejects Jesus. But the text says the sand builder hears my words.
He's in the room. He's listening to the deep dive. He agrees with the theology.
Precisely. He might even admire the sermon. Wow, Jesus, great point about enemy love.
Yeah.
Really powerful stuff. But he doesn't do it.
And this connects right back to the wineskins, doesn't it?
It's the same image from a different angle.
Yeah.
Think about leather. What keeps it pliable? Use, movement, oil, obedience, the actual doing of these hard things like loving enemies. That is the oil that keeps the leather of your heart pliable.
So passivity calcifies the heart.
Yes. If you hear this radical teaching and you just nod and say, that's nice, but you don't actually forgive the person who hurt you, your heart stiffens. It becomes the old wineskin. You're hearing the new wine, but you're trying to contain it in a rigid vessel of inaction.
And then when The pressure of life builds up. When the storm comes, as Jesus puts it, that rigid heart just bursts.
It ends in great ruin. It can't handle the reality of the kingdom because it never practiced the mechanics of the kingdom.
It's such a sobering ending to the chapter. It puts all the responsibility back on the listener. Luke is essentially asking Theophilus and asking you. You've seen the Sabbath explosion, you've seen the new community, you've tasted the radical ethic of enemy love. Now, what are you going to build?
And are you willing to be stretched? That's the real question. Jesus' ministry isn't just a gentle update, it's a chemical reaction, it's effervescent. He redefines the most sacred institution around his own authority. He forms a new community rooted in prayer. He teaches an ethic of mercy that completely inverts human nature.
It's an invitation to trade the old wine of self-preservation, comfortable religion, and judgment for the new wine of radical mercy and, well, reliance on him.
But it's an invitation that comes with a warning. You can't put this new teaching into your old structures. You can't just add love your enemy to a life built on look out for number one. It won't hold. You have to become something new.
Which leaves us with a final thought to chew on. In the source material, there was a reference to Luke 5:39, the verse right after the wineskin parable. And Jesus says something that feels incredibly validating of our struggle. He says, "No one after drinking old wine desires new," for he says, "The old is good."
It's a profound psychological insight. Jesus knows this is hard. We prefer the old. We prefer the familiar grudges, the familiar rules, the familiar comforts. The old wine tastes settled. It's aged. It feels safe.
So here's the challenge for you to mull over, or to mutter on, if we're using that Hebrew definition. What old wine are you sipping on right now? Is it a tradition, a grudge you feel completely justified in holding, a sense of your own righteousness?
What is that thing you were saying the old is good about, which is actually making you resist the fresh, explosive movement of Jesus in your life?
That's the question. Because if you want the new life, you have to be willing to let the old skins burst. Thanks for diving deep with us today. We'll see you next time.
New wine burns where truth is learned. Pour the new wine, living stream. Wake us from tradition's dream. Plant us by the waters deep, where walks for roots your promise keep.